Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tale Teller channel. Intro. 5 years ago, my mother made a promise, and it changed my entire life. Back then, my husband David and I were living in a small apartment in the heart of the city. One bedroom, a cramped kitchen just big enough for the two of us. The window overlooked a dull gray alley. Not luxurious by any means, but it was our home. We were newlyweds, full of dreams. And one of those dreams was to buy a real house, a place to raise our children. But the housing prices in Illinois? Absolutely unimaginable. Every weekend, David and I would sit together scrolling through real estate listings on the laptop. We'd point at the gorgeous pictures and laugh. One day, that'll be ours. It was like a prayer we repeated. David had a plan. We'll save up, he said. Buy a small place first, then in a few years, we'll move up. I nodded, but deep down, I wanted more. I wanted a house we could stay in for life. Then my mother, Linda, came along with her strong personality and even stronger ideas. Over dinner, she looked us straight in the eyes. Don't waste money on some tiny starter home. If you buy big. If not, don't bother. She said it with that motherly confidence that makes you believe it instantly. And then she made the promise. When you have a baby, I'll help you with the money to buy a big house. I'll take care of the baby so you both can work. No daycare needed. No worries at all. My heart lit up. That was the missing piece. With my mother's help, we could skip the starter home and go straight for the dream house. David smiled softly, as if a weight had been lifted. I squeezed his hand under the table, feeling like we'd just been handed a golden ticket. At that time, I had no idea. That promise would come with a price I could never have imagined. 3 months after my mother's promise, we signed the papers for a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. A white-painted home with a small wooden fence and a backyard big enough for Sophie. Well, I didn't know then that her name would be Sophie, to run around in one day. David spent his evenings and weekends repainting the nursery, a soft, gentle pink. He added a few fluffy white clouds on the walls, smiling as he painted. Our little girl will grow up here. I busied myself preparing every tiny item: clothes, blankets, pillows, baby bottles. Every time I looked into that room, I could see my future so clearly, bright and full of love. When Sophie was born, the whole family was overjoyed. My mother held her in her arms, kissed her cheek, and said, "My granddaughter, the most beautiful in the world." For the first 3 months after giving birth, I stayed home to take care of her. I got up 3 or 4 times each night to feed her, but strangely, I never felt tired, only happy. Just as she had promised, when I returned to work, my mother took care of Sophie. Every morning, I would carry my baby to her house, kiss her on the forehead, and head to work. It gave me an incredible sense of peace. In the afternoons, I would get off work, open my mother's door, and see Sophie lying on the rug, little hands waving, her mouth in a wide grin. My mother would be sitting beside her, folding laundry while softly singing. Life was truly perfect. David and I felt like we had done everything right. We had a home, a child, and a supportive family. I remember one evening, over dinner, David looked at me and said, "I think we have everything." I nodded, without a single doubt in my heart. Back then, I had no idea that just one sentence from my mother, on an afternoon like any other, would turn my entire world upside down. It was a Wednesday afternoon. The sky over Chicago was gloomy, and the wind cut sharply through the trees in front of my mother's house. I got off work earlier than usual and walked in feeling lighthearted. All I could think about was holding Sophie and hearing her laugh. But the moment I set my bag down, my mother called me into the kitchen. Her voice sounded strange, not cheerful, not warm like every other day. I sat down. "What's wrong, Mom?" She looked straight at me, then sighed. "Emma, I'm tired. I'm not going to watch Sophie anymore." I froze. "What?" "I want to stop. I have my own life. I want to travel, join a book club, do yoga. I need time for myself." I felt the blood rush to my face. "But you promised." My voice rose. "You promised to take care of Sophie so we could work. I believed in that promise." She turned her head away. "I know, but I've done enough. Now I want to live for myself." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Sophie's only a year old. She's too young for daycare. The mortgage is already crushing us. Do you know what this will do to us? She stayed silent. Only the ticking of the clock filled the wide kitchen. That night, I told David. He frowned. "So what now?" One of us has to quit our job to stay home with Sophie, but we still have to pay the mortgage. Are you staying home or am I? If you stay home, how will we pay the mortgage? I shot back, bitterness in my tone. We sat for hours, going through every option. Every path led to the same place: lost income. A few days later, I tried again with my mother. Just one more year, Mom. When Sophie's older, I'll figure out something else. But she only shook her head. Emma, you have to understand, I want to be happy too. I've spent my whole life raising you. Now you have your own family, and I want my freedom. My hands shook with anger as I held the phone. Do you think I'm not happy? I'm carrying everything. All I'm asking is for you to keep your promise. She was silent for a moment, then said something that cut me like a knife. You'll just have to manage on your own. And so, I stayed home. On my first day not working, I held Sophie in my arms all morning. She smiled, touching my cheek. But I couldn't fully enjoy the moment. My mind was filled with numbers: bills, mortgage, electricity, water. David left for work at 7 a.m. and came home at 9 p.m. He was exhausted, but still tried to play with Sophie for a few minutes before dinner. As for me, every day felt the same. Woken early by Sophie's cries, feeding her, changing her, cleaning, playing with her. At noon, trying to cook while she clung to me. By afternoon, my body ached and all I wanted was to lie down. But Sophie always needed me. In the evenings, I'd hear David's car pull in. He'd come in, force a smile, but I knew he was drained. We'd eat in silence, clean up, put Sophie in her crib, and quietly go to bed. Sometimes I called my mother, hoping she'd change her mind. But the answers were always the same. I'm busy. I have yoga today. I'm traveling with friends this week. I began to feel abandoned, as if my mother had chosen everything except her own daughter and granddaughter. One night, while David was bathing Sophie, I stood by the kitchen window. Across the street, the neighbors' lights glowed, laughter spilling into the night. I wondered, why had my family ended up like this? I didn't resent Sophie. She was my only joy. But I resented my mother, resented the promise that had lifted us up, then been taken away, throwing our lives into chaos. One day I called Sarah, my best friend, also a mom. After hearing my story, she said, Emma, you're stronger than you think, but if you need help, ask David's parents. They love Sophie. I hesitated. I don't want to bother them. Sarah cut me off. This isn't bothering them. This is family. Try it. I sat in silence, thinking about her words. David's parents, maybe this was the only way out. That evening I told David. He was quiet for a long time before nodding. Okay, we'll go this weekend. Lay it all out, no beating around the bush. I pressed my lips together, feeling both hopeful and afraid. If they said no, I didn't know what else we could do. In my mind, I could still see my mother's confident smile and hear the promise she once made. The promise that had changed everything, and now it was pushing us to the edge. Cliffhanger. I didn't know if that weekend would save us or make everything worse. The weekend came faster than I expected. On Saturday morning, the air was crisp and cool. I dressed Sophie in a pink knit dress and a tiny, adorable hat. David drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. We were both silent. David's parents' house was in a quiet suburb, the trees in front already turning golden. As soon as we stepped inside, the warm scent of pumpkin pie filled the air. Sophie chirped happily at the sight of her grandparents, darting into their arms like a little bird. After the Thanksgiving dinner, while we were all sipping hot tea, I took a deep breath. I have something to say. David's parents looked at me, their eyes warm but curious. David gave me a slight nod, telling me to go ahead. Emma's mom, well, my mom isn't helping with Sophie anymore. David and I are under a lot of stress with the mortgage and work. We really need help. The living room fell silent for a few seconds. Well, David's father slowly set down his teacup. We're getting older, but weekends are fine. We can watch Sophie so you two can rest or work extra. I felt my eyes sting. Thank you. This means so much to us. On the way home, David squeezed my hand. At least part of the load is lifted. I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. That night, while I was folding Sophie's clothes, the doorbell rang. I opened it to see my mother standing there. The wind tossed her hair, and she held a gift bag in her hands. I came to see my granddaughter, she said, stepping inside as if there had never been any distance between us. Sophie giggled as my mother lifted her up. I sat down, trying to keep my tone even. We're managing. It's hard, Mom, she sighed softly. I know you're angry, but I need my own time too. Still, I can help 2 days a week. It's not much, but I hope it helps. I blinked in surprise. Really? Really? She looked straight at me. We're still family, Emma. I hugged her, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. That night, I lay in bed watching Sophie sleep, my heart full of gratitude. Life wasn't perfect, but it seemed like it was slowly finding a rhythm again. What I didn't know was that the next challenge would come from David's new job. A week after my mother agreed to watch Sophie 2 days a week, David got good news. He had been hired by a larger construction company with a much higher salary. His eyes lit up as he read the offer letter. "This is it, honey. This is our chance. Things will get easier." I smiled, but my heart sank when he added, "But I'll have to work longer hours, maybe even later than I do now." I was quiet for a few seconds. "So that means I'll be home with Sophie even more." He nodded. "I know it's hard, but it's only for a while. Once we're financially stable, we can find another way." I bit my lip. I wanted to believe that. On his first day at the new company, I woke up at 6 a.m., made coffee, prepared breakfast, then woke Sophie. She grinned at me, as if giving me the energy to face the long day ahead. On the 2 days my mom watched Sophie, I took on freelance graphic design work. Sitting at my computer, ideas flowed through my mind, and I felt like I'd found a piece of my old self again. But on the other 3 days, I hardly left Sophie's side. I ate lunch with her in my lap, cleaned the house while humming lullabies so she wouldn't cry. By the time David came home in the evening, I was completely drained. One night, after he put Sophie in her crib, I sank to the floor. "I'm so tired, David. I feel like I don't have any time for myself anymore." He sat beside me, holding my hand. "I know, I'm tired too, but look at Sophie. See? She's happy. We're doing a good job." I looked at Sophie, her eyes closed, breathing softly. My heart eased. "Yeah, as long as she's happy, we'll be fine." My mother kept her new promise. Twice a week, she'd arrive early, play with Sophie in the backyard, teaching her to babble grandma. I'd watch from the doorway, that scene filling me with both warmth and a faint ache. I thought about her original promise and wondered, if nothing had changed, would we be happier now? Still, life began to find its rhythm. I worked while Sophie napped, David put in overtime, and on weekends, Sophie stayed with her paternal grandparents. It wasn't perfect, but it was the balance we could hold on to for now. One evening, while the three of us were having dinner, Sophie suddenly blurted out 2 words, "Mama, Dada." David and I both burst into laughter, as if all the exhaustion had melted away. "See?" David said, his eyes bright. "We're okay." I nodded. "Yeah, we're okay." But deep down, I knew we were only just okay. One more blow and everything could collapse, and then that blow came sooner than I expected. That night, David came home later than usual. The clock was nearing 11 p.m. I was sitting on the sofa, Sophie asleep in her room. The moment he walked in, I knew something was wrong. "Why so late?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He took off his coat and sighed. Today, the company announced they've taken on a big new project. I'll have to work Saturdays and Sundays, at least for the next few months. I froze. The whole weekend? What about time for Sophie, for the family? He looked at me, his eyes tired. "I know, but if I say no, I'll lose the chance for a promotion. The extra pay will help us pay off our debts faster." I turned away. Part of me wanted to support him, but another part was terrified. We had just found a fragile balance, and now it was under threat again. In the days that followed, David was home only to sleep. In the mornings, he left before Sophie woke up. At night, when he returned, she was already fast asleep. I began to notice Sophie looking for Dada around the house, pointing at the front door and then glancing at me, her eyes full of hope. Each time, my heart ached. One afternoon, my mother came to watch Sophie. I tried to work, but the sound of their laughter in the yard made me stop. She was carrying Sophie, running in circles, and my daughter was laughing uncontrollably. I stepped outside, feeling both happy and sad. "If only you had kept your promise from the start." My mother stopped and looked at me. "Emma, I can't change the past, but I'm trying to make it right. Let me help as much as I can now." I stayed quiet. Maybe she really had changed. But was it enough? One evening when David came home, I handed him a photo, Sophie playing in the yard, holding a tiny flower. "She misses you so much." David looked at the picture, his eyes turning red. "I know, I'll try to make time, but right now, we need the money more than ever." I nodded, but deep inside, a fear grew. that in our race to survive, we might lose the most precious moments with our child. And then a phone call on Monday morning changed everything. Monday morning, while I was feeding Sophie breakfast, the phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "Hello, this is Emma." A woman's voice came through, serious but warm. "I'm calling from St. Mary's Hospital. Mrs. Linda, your mother, has just been brought into the ER." I froze. "What? How? Is she okay?" "She fell while leaving the supermarket. It's not life-threatening, but she'll need to rest for a few weeks." I quickly picked Sophie up, my hands trembling as I called David. "Mom's had an accident. I need to get to the hospital right now." He was silent for a few seconds. "I'm at the construction site. I can't leave immediately. Do your best, okay?" I understood, but I still felt a pang of disappointment. When I arrived at the hospital, I found my mother lying in bed, her leg in a cast, her face pale. She looked at me and tried to smile. "Don't worry, I'm fine. Just a little clumsy." I sat down and held her hand. "Mom, who's going to watch Sophie while you recover?" "My work," she sighed. "I'm sorry. This time I really can't help." That night, I stood at the window holding Sophie. Outside, the pale yellow glow of the street lamp spilled into the room. I felt like we were back at square one, no childcare, my work stalled, and David buried in his project. 3 days later, things got worse. I had to turn down 2 design projects because I couldn't focus. Our bank account began to drop quickly. One evening, David came home late, sweat dripping down his face. I handed him a paper listing our expenses. "At this rate, we'll be out of money in just 2 months." He looked at it, then sat down, burying his head in his hands. "I can't quit my job, but I can't abandon my family either." I took his hand. "Maybe we need to think about another solution, something we've never dared to consider before." He looked up. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "We might have to sell this house." Silence filled the room. Only the sound of Sophie's steady breathing came from the next room. David looked at me, his eyes a mix of surprise and sadness. "You know what that would mean, right?" I nodded. "Yes, but maybe it's the only way to keep our family from falling apart." And just then, the phone rang, bringing an offer we never could have expected. The phone kept ringing, its sound echoing through the dark living room. David looked at me and gestured for me to answer. "Hello, this is Emma." A warm, deep male voice came on the line. "Sorry for calling so late. I'm Mark, Sarah's older brother, your close friend." I was surprised. "Yes, I remember. Is something wrong?" Mark spoke slowly. "Sarah told me about your situation. I have a proposal, but it's a little unusual." I glanced at David. "Go ahead." "I need someone to manage my family's lakeside vacation home in Wisconsin. Room and board included, plus a monthly salary. You'd only need to look after the property and greet weekend renters. You and your family could move there." My heart raced. Room and board? A salary? That would mean we wouldn't have to pay for housing. But David frowned. "Why us?" His tone was casual, but I knew he was wary. Mark gave a soft laugh. "Sarah trusts you both, and I want the house to be filled with a child's laughter. My little daughter passed away when she was 2. Hearing Sophie laugh would probably warm my heart." The room fell silent. I bit my lip, holding back emotion. David spoke. "It sounds good, but that's a different city. What about my job?" Mark replied right away. "I know a construction company there. I could recommend you. No promises, but they are short on workers." After the call, David and I sat across from each other, sank 2 cups of cold coffee between us. "What do you think?" David asked. "I think this could be an opportunity. We'd ease our financial burden. Sophie would have more space to play. And," I hesitated, "we could be together more without you working 12 hours a day." David looked out the window, where the streetlight's glow reflected on the glass. "But leaving here means leaving everything behind." I took his hand. "Maybe this could be a new beginning. A place where we're not stuck anymore." He stayed silent for a long time, then gave a small nod. "All right, but I want to see the place before deciding." I smiled softly. "Then this weekend?" He nodded. "This weekend." I didn't know that trip would open a completely different door and bring with it secrets I had never imagined. On Saturday morning, we packed the car to the brim. Suitcases of clothes, Sophie's toys, and a few snacks. Sophie sat in the back seat, legs swinging, giggling every time the trees blurred past the window. After more than 3 hours of driving, the road opened up to a wide view. A deep blue lake stretching far into the distance, reflecting the pale gray winter sky. On the shore stood a two-story wooden house, simple but warm, with a wide porch and an old wooden swing. Mark was waiting in the yard, bundled in a thick sweater, waving. "Welcome to Lakeview Lodge." He gave us a tour, a spacious living room with a stone fireplace, a bright kitchen, and 3 bedrooms upstairs. Everything was clean and tidy, as if it had just been thoroughly prepared. Sophie ran around everywhere, calling, "Mama, so pretty," again and again, making me laugh. Afterward, Mark led us to the back of the house. There, a small yard opened directly onto the lakefront, where a long wooden dock stretched out over the water. "In the summer, kids usually fish here," Mark said, his voice softening, "but now it's quieter." David stood on the dock, gazing out over the still lake. "It's peaceful," he murmured. But as I walked along the upstairs hallway, my steps slowed. At the very end, a door stood slightly ajar. Curious, I pushed it open. Inside was a small, dimly lit room. On the desk sat a framed photograph of a blonde little girl about Sophie's age. A thin layer of dust coated it, as if no one had touched it in a long time. I heard footsteps behind me. Mark stood there, his expression subdued. "That's Lily's room, my daughter's." I quietly apologized and started to step out, but he only nodded. "It's fine, I haven't cleared it out. Keeping it this way is my way of remembering her." That evening, we had dinner with Mark. He explained the job of managing the lodge, greeting weekend guests, checking the rooms, maintaining the dock. It all sounded simple enough. But during the conversation, I noticed how often Mark's eyes drifted toward the lake, his gaze distant. When I asked about it, he only said, "This lake has more stories than you think," and fell silent. Night came. David and I lay in the guest room. Outside, the wind hissed through the trees. I was about to drift off when I heard a faint creak, like footsteps on wooden floorboards. I opened my eyes, but the hallway was pitch dark, empty. At the time, I didn't know. This was only the first sign of the strange things waiting for us at Lakeview Lodge. On our second night at Lakeview Lodge, the wind over the lake grew stronger. Dry branches scraped against the porch roof with a soft rustle, as if someone were quietly moving outside. Sophie was sound asleep in the next room. David lay beside me, but the steady rhythm of his breathing wasn't enough to ease the creeping unease inside me. Near midnight, knock, 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 soft tapping came from somewhere. I opened my eyes, listening. At first, I thought it was just the wind rattling a door, but the sound repeated, steady, 3 knocks at a time, as if someone were making it on purpose. I gently shook David. "Do you hear that?" He rubbed his eyes, straining to listen. "Knock, knock, knock." "Could be the pipes," he whispered, but I could see the hint of worry in his eyes. We tiptoed into the pitch-dark hallway. A faint glow spilled from Sophie's nightlight, while at the end of the hall, the door to Lily's room, Mark's daughter, remained firmly shut. The knocking was coming from that direction. My heart pounded. David stepped forward, hand on the doorknob, probably just a mouse or something. He turned it slightly. The door wasn't locked. A draft of cold air slipped out, carrying a faint smell of dampness. The room looked exactly as it had yesterday, a small bed, a desk with a framed photo of a little girl. But this time, the frame was lying face down. I was certain it had been standing upright before. Knock, knock, knock. We both jumped. The sound wasn't coming from inside the room, it was coming from the window. David walked over and pulled the curtain aside. Outside was only a wall of darkness, and the still lake reflecting a faint trace of moonlight. No one was there. He let the curtain fall, probably just a branch hitting the glass. I nodded, but as I turned away, out of the corner of my eye, I caught the faint silhouette of a little girl standing in the corner, silently watching us. I screamed, stumbling back toward the door. David spun around, but the corner was empty. "Emma, are you sure you—" He didn't finish because the knocking returned, this time, from beneath the floor. We froze. Somewhere under our feet, something was trying to come up. Thank you for watching today's episode. If you felt the same chill I did hearing those knocks, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next episode, The Secret Beneath the Floor, where we'll find out who or what is trying to reach us from beneath Lakeview Lodge. See you next time, and remember, tonight, listen carefully to the sounds around you.